Welcome to the Mindful You podcast, brought to you by the Mindful University Project at the University of Rochester. Our mission is to cultivate presence, compassion, and well being by integrating mindfulness and contemplative practices into campus life.
We offer practices such as yoga, meditation, retreats, trainings, and other initiatives to support students, faculty, and staff.
Through this podcast, we share mindfulness journeys and insights on how being present can support mental health, focus, and resilience. Thank you for joining us. Let's explore how mindfulness can transform our lives together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mindful University Project podcast. My name is Rebecca Block. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm welcomed here today with Anna Olivieri, who is one of our collaborators through the Mindful University Project, who leads our Healing from Within class. And I'm really excited to have Anna join on the podcast today to talk about her experience with chronic pain and also pain reprocessing therapy and the class that we started offering this past spring. So Anna, if you'd like to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. Yes, my name's Anna Olivieri. I'm lucky enough to have given the Healing from Within workshop at University of Rochester. I'm a certified pain reprocessing coach, and I'm also the co-founder of the Digestible app, which is specifically designed for people with irritable bowel syndrome that I'd love to tell you more about too.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast and for your collaboration. And I'm really excited to dive deep into things today. So, firstly, can you share your personal or professional journey that led you to become a pain reprocessing therapy coach?
Yeah, and I'll probably start with my personal journey since that was very relevant to me becoming kind of entering this space. So I dealt with various forms of chronic pain over the course of 8 years, and I received various diagnoses from things like IBS, migraine, TMJ disorder, fibromyalgia. I had a host of symptoms, as you can probably tell from those diagnoses. And so I tried a lot of physical treatments. I tried medications, injections, supplements, PT, massage, every elimination diet that you could possibly imagine. But none of it really worked for me. And my symptoms were just getting worse. And they kind of worsened to this point in 2021, where I was really completely debilitated by these symptoms. I was essentially housebound, not really leaving the house at all, and only eating 5 different foods. And I was, as you can imagine, like my desperation was just growing as I was like trying to figure out what was going on with me and my body. And so eventually I came across the work of psychologist named Alan Gordon, who's one of the creators of pain reprocessing therapy. And finding this work really put me on this path to recovery. And today I can eat any foods that I want. I travel and I don't have any chronic symptoms, which for a really long time I just thought simply was never going to be possible for me. I thought I would just have to kind of cope and deal with these symptoms for probably the rest of my life. And so undergoing this personal transformation was really mind blowing for me, and life altering, obviously. And it really inspired me to share what I had learned from about chronic pain and symptoms in the hopes of helping others. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm coaching people with chronic pain using mind-body approaches like pain reprocessing therapy.
Yeah, and so this experience of having chronic pain has led you to this professional journey, which is so amazing to hear of your resilience to go from being in debilitation to now helping people with chronic pain. And for those listening, we also met in 2021 or 2022. I can't remember the year. Time is kind of a blur at this point, but we met through a group called Curable. It's a 12-week group where you learn a lot about the mind-body approach and specifically neuroplastic pain, which we'll get into a little bit more during this interview. But there's a lot of experiences that we have. I personally experienced chronic pain as well, that a lot of our students and faculty and staff experience as well. So we're really excited to bring this to the University of Rochester as the first PRT offering at a higher education facility. So, how would you describe pain reprocessing therapy for those who do not know anything about this?
Okay, so PRT is a system of techniques that's rooted in neuroscience research to help reduce or eliminate chronic pain. So this might sound a little bit different because, many other therapies that you may have heard of around pain management are, you might use words like we're looking to manage your symptoms or cope with symptoms. PRT is really aimed at reducing or eliminating the pain or symptoms themselves. And it's based on this premise that most forms of chronic pain are actually caused by learned neural pathways, or you can think of it like the wiring in the brain. And essentially, it's like a misfiring of these pain circuits in the brain. Because normally, pain is a helpful signal, right? It tells us to move our hand off of a hot stove. But the brain can make a mistake and actually get caught in this cycle of generating chronic pain, and in some cases, even in the absence of any structural damage in the body. So, which of course, this is not very helpful pain, and it can be really debilitating. So, PRT is designed to help break that cycle. So, there was a pivotal study published on PRT by Yoni Ashar and others back in 2022 called the Boulder Back Pain Study. So, they took individuals with chronic back pain, which they had had for on average of over 10 years, and the treatment group underwent 4 weeks of pain reprocessing therapy. And after that treatment, just for those 4 weeks, 66 reported being pain-free or nearly pain-free. And those results were maintained up to a 1 year follow-up as well. So this wasn't just like a temporary decrease in their pain. It lasted over time. And another really cool part of the study was they did brain scans of these people before and after the treatment. And they could actually see changes in activity in these parts of the brain related to pain perception. So we talk about like rewiring the brain. What's really cool is we've actually been able to observe that in some of these studies. One other study I wanted to mention from Northwestern was done to determine the brain's role in the development of chronic pain. So these researchers tracked patients after an initial back injury. So they were still in that kind of like acute phase of pain. And they took brain scans of them to see if they could predict who would go on to develop chronic pain just based on their brain scans alone.
Mm.
And they were looking at like increased connectivity between these two areas, the nucleus accumbens and the prefrontal cortex. And what they found was their predictions were accurate 85% of the time.
Wow.
So really amazing, right? And what this is telling us is that many forms of chronic pain have to do more with what's going on in the brain rather than the body, which is a huge paradigm shift with how we tend to think about pain and symptoms, right? And, this study also points towards the fact that certain people are kind of predisposed to developing chronic pain based on their neurobiology and how their brains are structured. But the good news is that our brains are very plastic. They can be changed, which is exactly what PRT aims to do. So PRT is aimed at unlearning these neural pathways that can keep pain and symptoms alive. And really, it does so by changing how the brain is interpreting the sensory information that it's receiving from the body by reinterpreting these sensations as non-threatening, right? We're working with removing fear, frustration, some of these like totally normal, natural reactions that we have in response to these sensations, but that can inadvertently actually fuel them. So we look for things like that, like fear avoidance behaviors that can kind of fuel this whole pain fear cycle that can keep the symptoms going.
Yeah, the mind and body are so interconnected, and our bodies are really our best teachers. And so that's what we learn a lot through mindfulness and contemplative practices is that sense of embodiment that we're listening to both the mind and the body at the same time, and that when the body's speaking, there's something to be had there. There's usually something that maybe we're not listening to, or maybe there's something that we need that we don't fully comprehend yet. And so, can you describe like some of the different symptoms or conditions that may present as neuroplastic pain that may benefit from pain reprocessing therapy?
Yeah, so thanks for bringing up that term neuroplastic symptoms. So we classify symptoms that are driven by these like learned neural pathways in the brain as neuroplastic symptoms. And these can take many different forms. So things like migraines, tension headaches, fibromyalgia, back pain, neck pain, knee pain, foot pain, jaw pain, insomnia, chronic fatigue, tinnitus or ringing in the ears, dizziness, eczema or other skin issues, digestive issues like irritable bowel syndrome, POTS, and what research is even telling us long COVID is often the result of these learned neural pathways in the brain. So that's not to say that if you have one of these types of symptoms or diagnoses that your symptoms are definitely neuroplastic, and certainly still go to your doctor to get these symptoms checked out. But there are some criteria that you can look for to help understand whether your symptoms may be caused or amplified by the brain and nervous system. So there's a simple quiz that you can take on the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms, the ATNS website. So their URL is symptomatic.me. And they have this 12 question quiz, which was developed by physicians to help people understand if their symptoms may have a neuroplastic element, and therefore may benefit from some of the methods like pain reprocessing therapy that we were talking about.
Thanks so much for sharing. And that 12 question survey is really helpful and can help just like kickstart your journey to diving deeper into the root cause about your symptoms. And so, as Anna mentioned, there's a lot of things that can start chronic pain, and there's some specific things that predispose people to developing chronic pain. And one of those things is emotions, specifically anger, fear, frustration, even grief, and even happiness. All these different emotions can really impact our body. And we know that emotion is energy in motion. And so that's why we feel a lot of our emotions in our body. And so, can you tell us more about the role between emotions and how they may present in physical symptoms? And how do you help clients with that and exploring that connection?
Yeah. So maybe starting with a little bit of a history lesson. Back in the 80s and 90s, there was a physician named Dr. John Sarno, who you might have heard of, who became very famous for successfully treating chronic back pain. He wrote books like Healing Back Pain and The Mind Body Prescription that propose that there can be psychological roots to physical pain and symptoms. And Dr. Sarno suggested that hidden emotional turmoil, like you're talking about, or especially things like repressed emotions, can manifest as chronic back pain or other chronic pain and symptoms. And so, contrary to the typical advice at the time, Dr. Sarno was actually out there encouraging his patients to continue with regular movement and exercise, challenging the notion that pain always signals structural damage, which now, with modern neuroscience research, we know that it doesn't. And so many of his readers will actually credit his approach with completely relieving their chronic pain and chronic back pain by addressing mind-body issues. So there are even some celebrities out there like Howard Stern and Larry David who have also attested to having their back pain completely cured by Dr. Sarno. And so while his work was more theoretical at the time, based on his work with his patients, many of his theories are now being validated through research. And one of the therapies, more recent therapies that has emerged based on his work is called emotional awareness and expression therapy, or EAET. And this emerged as a, significant psychological intervention for individuals experiencing chronic pain. And this therapy focuses on enhancing emotional awareness and encouraging the expression of these normal, natural human emotions that we all have, which we often, whether we're aware of it or not, tend to suppress. And they do tend to be more suppressed in patients suffering from chronic pain or symptoms. And so there was a study in 2017 by Lumley et al. That found that EAT was actually superior to the gold standard treatment of cognitive behavioral therapy for reducing pain and symptoms. So we know that working with emotions is a really key part to this as well. And so I work with a lot of my clients on identifying the emotional states that they're experiencing and guiding them to explore and express these feelings because emotions are these mental and physical states that are always flowing, right? They're just part of being human. And but when we consciously or not kind of start to shut down that experience, it can create this sort of like internal tension and stress, which can then be expressed via symptoms in the body. So I also like to utilize a tool for this called expressive journaling, which can be a really helpful practice. And this is a type of journaling that focuses on exploring emotions from the past and putting them on paper in a very non-judgmental, authentic way. And doing so can promote, really healthy emotional processing about these past events and increase our window of tolerance for feeling those same emotions when they come up again. So this practice has a lot of research behind it in showing improvements in things like not just reducing pain and symptoms, but sleep, mental health as well. Nicole Sachs also has a really great framework for journaling called Journal Speak, that we can link in the description too.
And so there's a lot of evidence showing that expressing emotions can be really helpful with lots of different things, specifically mental health and also physical health. And it goes back to that quote of what we resist persists. And so it's really something that feels unnatural for a lot of us because in society we feel that we need to repress our emotions or that our emotions are unsafe. And so I'm just curious about your work blending emotional awareness and expression therapy as well as pain reprocessing therapy and mindfulness. How do you see them complementing one another?
Yeah, I think they're very complementary practices, right? PRT, I would say, focuses more on changing the relationship with the symptom itself, is kind of at the core of it, right? Is like how can we break free from this pain fear cycle by changing the way we think about our pain, the way we respond to our pain, the way we engage with our lives, right? Like how can we kind of break out of some of the common like hypervigilance that we see around symptoms? And then on the emotional side of things is like how can we actually relate to our emotions differently too? Because emotions are so key in pain. They're in the definition, like the formal definition of pain. It's a sensory and emotional experience, right? And these emotional centers of our brain are very critical in informing the brain's decision of whether to generate pain. So working with emotions and changing how we allow those to be felt or not is really key too. And then, you mentioned the mindfulness piece. That's just such a helpful tool all around for learning ways to manage stress. That's also like kind of thinking about, mindfulness meditation of like, how do we engage with our thoughts, right? Because thoughts can be such a sneaky way of bringing in fear or self-criticism or, the way we relate to stress in our lives that, mindfulness really helps us slow down and kind of be more observant about the way that we are interacting with our thinking, and which thoughts we're choosing to engage with versus kind of allow them to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and a lot of individuals feel like sitting with their emotions or their feelings, they have to push it away. And so, with mindfulness and even pain reprocessing therapy and EAET, we're learning how to sit with what we're experiencing, honoring that everything we're experiencing is safe. We're not in like a hurricane. We're not in like a really wild situation where these things are just fleeting thoughts or feeling fleeting sensations. And that lens of curiosity and unattachment is really key here, especially with chronic pain. It's really cool to see the interconnectedness between these approaches and mindfulness as well. So, is there any advice that you'd offer to people who are dealing with chronic pain, but haven't considered yet this mind-body approach, or that there could be some neuroplastic pain that is causing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you have tried a lot of body-based or physical treatments like medication, supplements, diets, PT, etc., and you are not finding relief for your symptoms, it does not mean that you are doomed to suffer forever, right? I think a lot of us kind of fall into that thinking when it's like, I'm trying everything that, the maybe doctors have told us to do. There are treatments that can help. It may just be more focused on the brain rather than the body. I was very resistant to believe this myself because when you feel a symptom in your body, it's natural to assume that there must be something physically wrong. But all pain is generated in the brain, regardless of if there's, a structural cause in the body or not. And things like emotions, stress, beliefs, and mental habits can all influence the brain of whether to generate pain or not. And these things can create real and debilitating physical symptoms in the body. So I would say, yeah, go to symptomatic.me and take that 12-question quiz to see if you relate to some of these things and your symptoms may have a neuroplastic component. And then keep learning, right? There's so many great resources out there, which we'll also link in the description, to learn more about pain, right? Like learning about this is part of the therapeutic effect of like learning that pain is not an objective measure of damage in the body. That alone can help people. And then there's so many great techniques to layer on top of that to help unlearn those neural pathways that could be keeping your symptoms going.
Yeah, what's really fascinating is to hear of all the people who had the quote unquote book cure from reading Dr. Sarno's book or maybe Alan Gordon's book, just by learning about the neuroscience, learning about the connection between emotions and all these different personality traits and how they can contribute to chronic pain. And so there's a lot of different stuff that we include in pain reprocessing therapy, but even just learning the neuroscience itself can really help you to be convinced or to find more evidence as to why you have or what may be the root cause of your pain, whether it's neuroplastic, whether it is structural, and even if it's structural, it can have some benefits, correct, Anna?
Yes. So there is also a lot of research showing that, even if something were to show up on an MRI, like a herniated disc or, whatever the thing is, um, there's this concept of normal abnormalities that a lot of the physicians in this space talk about, where many people who have those, abnormalities and on show up on their scans actually don't have pain, right? Like some of these things aren't a great predictor of pain either. So just because there may be a finding, here or there, I was diagnosed with many different things. I had things show up on testing that I was convinced, oh, this must be the thing, right? It's not always so, right? And of course, like keep working with your doctor and doing those tests, but also keep in mind that, if there is something structurally found, that doesn't mean that your symptom is not neuroplastic either. And if you do have even if you do have a structural cause of your pain that is causing your pain, right? These techniques can still be helpful, right? Because going back to all pain is generated in the brain. You can't take that out of the equation when we're talking about pain and symptoms. So working with these things, working with reducing fear, reducing resistance to emotions, self-compassion, mindfulness. All of these things are still going to be helpful for you, regardless of the cause of your pain.
Mhm. Yeah, and even Nicole Sachs, who created Journal Speak, she has a condition of the spine called spondylolisthesis, and she was told that she couldn't have kids, that she couldn't exercise, couldn't do a lot of things. And we both went to her retreat last year, and she has no pain, no chronic pain. She was standing the entire time. She was walking around with no mobility aids. And so she's a testament to even if you have a structural issue that really diving deep into the emotional landscape can really help to rewire your brain to unlearn that pain. So it's really fascinating that even if you don't just have neuroplastic pain, there may be a neuroplastic nature of structural conditions, and that all pain is created in the brain. So this work may be really beneficial no matter what type of pain you have. So, is there like a simple mindset shift or practice that you'd recommend to somebody starting their mind-body healing journey?
Yeah, great question. I think the first mindset shift that is important, which I already mentioned, is just learning about how pain and symptoms are not as simple as, they're not this objective measure of damage in our bodies. And keep learning about that too. And listen to recovery stories, right? Because sometimes I think we like to think that, oh, well, this won't work for me though. Like I'm unique in this way that this work is not going to help me. Especially when we've been through so many failed treatments, it's like so natural to think that way. But keep learning, keep listening to people's stories. There are so many great resources, like I said, that we'll link in the description to learn more about this, books, documentaries, stuff on YouTube that you can get for free, to hear about this and really understand that the power of the mind-body connection, because I think we underestimate it. And we just think in this very biomedical view of pain equals damage in the body, which, of course, it definitely can be, but not necessarily so. And especially with chronic pain, what research is telling us is that it often has a lot more to do with the brain and these learned neural pathways. So keep learning about that, I would say, is the biggest mindset shift. And then as far as simple practices, one that I really like to use is called somatic tracking. And this is a guided practice focused on helping the brain reinterpret sensations from the body as non-dangerous. So it's all about observing uncomfortable sensations in the body through a lens of safety. And this is a key technique within pain reprocessing therapy. And you can also find really great free practices for it on YouTube to give it a try. But yeah, this is when we're talking about rewiring the brain and changing the way the brain is perceiving sensory input from the body. This is a really powerful and simple tool that you can turn to for that.
Well, thanks so much for those tips. Those are definitely so helpful. And specifically that somatic tracking, it's very, very transformative, which we both have experienced, but it's also really cool to see how that really impacts clients and other individuals. Alan Gordon on YouTube even guides people through somatic tracking. So if you're interested, you can also look at Alan Gordon leading people through somatic tracking. And there's also tons of other resources on that practice that we can also include for you to practice if you'd like. So, tell us more about the partnership that we developed through the University of Rochester, and how has it been like to offer healing from within on campus?
Yeah, so Rebecca was kind enough to invite me to offer a workshop for U of R students based on things like PRT, EAT, and other mind-body techniques. And so, this has really been the perfect setting to offer this because U of R is the home of the biopsychosocial approach, right? Which is a different way of looking at, it's a lens that can be applied to many things, but also pain and symptoms, where, it's not just our biology, right? There's these psychological and sociological influences that can determine if and how much pain and symptoms we experience, right? And so and U of R also offers an amazing mind body healing certificate. So it's been such a wonderful experience to get to engage with students and share this information, and these techniques that are often, I think quite different from maybe the pain management strategies that they've used in the past.
Yeah, and so what we found through our surveys, we conduct a National College Health Assessment, which is done out of the American College Health Association every 2 years out of our office. And we conducted a study on this with a random sample of students. And we found that with our student population, about 66 to 70% of our undergrads and grad students in the past year sought health care or mental health care regarding chronic pain. And so those are very high stats, and it is actually concurrent with the national statistics of over 100,000 students in the nation. And so what's really interesting is to see how high chronic pain is amongst our student population, as well as our faculty and staff and our entire US population. And so this is really important. And we're really excited to spread awareness about neuroplastic pain and how to heal from this. And so a lot of individuals who go through pain reprocessing therapy, EAT, probably are understand a little bit about what to experience in a series like this, but can you describe what participants of this class can expect of the Healing from Within class?
Mhm. Yeah, so it's a 4 week class. We have one, 75-minute session per week. And we cover various topics from starting with some of the pain neuroscience education and also branching into techniques like things from PRT and EAT. And so it's a mix of, I'd say, education and, sort of hands-on practices and exercises. I also like to offer some homework assignments, of some brief videos to check out or some of the journaling exercises like we were talking about. Um, Participants who completed all of the sessions also got a free copy of the pain reprocessing therapy workbook. So it's really a mix of learning and practicing together. And it's and then I like to end the workshop with also how to reconnect with life, right? Because the goal with all of this is obviously, first and foremost, reducing or eliminating the symptom, but also how do we get back to the things in life that really make us feel good, bring us joy, give us that, make us feel connected and happy to be alive, right? Like that's at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to get back to. And I think when we've been dealing with chronic pain and symptoms for so long, that can become so all-consuming in our lives. And so how do we, I like to end with like, all right, how can we start to shift the mindset around that? And rather than constantly trying to avoid pain of like, what are the things that you want to go after, right? Like defining those things, the values and the things that really light you up inside, I think can be a really helpful. I like ending it that way because I think it's just gives a different perspective that you might lose sight of when you're in the midst of dealing with chronic pain and symptoms.
Especially as we become more adults over time, also entering into a university setting as a student, there's a lot of newfound responsibilities and also stressors. And so we find that oftentimes our students are not experiencing as much joy, not playing as much, not experiencing as much gratitude. And so these practices can be really helpful. And something that I loved from our curable class is how they always started us with discussing glimmers. And so glimmers are just a little shout out for everybody to share about something that brought them joy or gratitude that past week. And it is really, really amazing experiencing glimmers. And Anna, I believe you know a little bit more about the research than I do. Could you explain a little bit about glimmers?
Yeah, and so you said it well. I think I kind of think of glimmers as like the opposite of triggers, right? Glimmers are these little moments that we have throughout our day of just little moments of joy, little moments of, like, oh, I'm grateful for the weather today and the sun is kind of like um coming through the leaves and it's this like just beautiful scene out my window right now. Like that's kind of a little glimmer for me. And it's about savoring those moments, right? Because I think when our brain's sort of stuck in this kind of threat detecting mode, which it tends to do when we've been dealing with symptoms for a very long time, we it forgets about those things, right? It's like, oh, that's I need to stay in keeping Rebecca safe, right? Like I need to stay in this threat detecting mode to keep her safe all the time. I don't have time for things like gratitude or enjoyment or other, things that seem maybe trivial to the brain when it's in a survival state. And so we're challenging that, right? We're ultimately with PRT, we're trying to help the brain feel safer.
Mhm.
And so doing things like slowing down and taking time for those moments might sound cheesy, but it really is activating different parts of the brain, and it's helping your nervous system feel like it's actually okay to turn down the dial on some of this hypervigilance and threat detection mode that it is likely in. So we're challenging these habits that our brain and nervous system have fallen into by bringing in things like gratitude and play and glimmers. And it's sort of giving less oxygen to these other neural pathways that want to tell us that we need to be fearful and hypervigilant all of the time.
Yeah, and so a lot of people who have chronic pain see that going on vacation or coming back from work or school. There's a lot of different things that can really help people to reduce their symptoms or even completely eliminate it when they're very engaged with a loved one or a friend, eating a nice meal, going on a walk and savoring the nature around them. They feel a reduction in their symptoms. And so this is just a really tangible, accessible practice to do. It's like whatever brings you alive, try it a little bit more, and whatever focus you have on the symptoms, shift it over to something that provides you joy and gratitude. And that in itself is a really easy practice that doesn't really cost any money, depending on what you're doing, but usually glimmers or something that has already happened as well. So, yeah, what do you think about like in general bringing the mind-body healing approaches to a university setting?
Yeah, I think it's so important. Like you said, research tells us that college students have higher rates of chronic pain than the general population. And, it's thought that the stress of the academic demands and the rigor of it all could play a role in this. So it is especially important for college students to learn about the psychosocial factors that can impact chronic pain, and learn that there are effective treatments that can help. You know, I, um, my symptoms first started my senior year of college.
Mm.
And if I could have learned about it then versus 8 years later, it could have maybe saved me a lot of suffering and just going down this rabbit hole of physical treatments that I thought were the only option for me, right? And I didn't make those connections till a lot later, and I'm so grateful that I did. But I think making that information more accessible, right, is so key. And the fact that college students are experiencing these at such higher rates, what a better setting to share that information.
Hmm. Yeah, and incredibly grateful for you to be able to offer this to the University of Rochester, the first institution that we know of in higher ed to offer an offering like this using PRT and EAET, these evidence-based practices. And so we're really excited that we'll be offering it also to faculty and staff in the fall, given that the Mindful University project really honors that student well-being is really only part of the equation, that the faculty and staff that also support students is really important. And our faculty and staff are experiencing a lot of chronic pain. In the US, it's about 1 in 3 individuals who experience chronic pain. And so we want to make sure that the entire ecosystem of the university can be well. And so we're going to be opening it up to faculty and staff as well. So, how can students, faculty, and staff get connected with your work, either through the class or coaching? And also, if you want to provide information about your app as well.
Yeah, so you can find more about me and my coaching at annaolivieri.com, or you can also follow me on Instagram at Rethink Pain. I do offer 30-minute free consultations if you just need to see if pain reprocessing therapy might be a good fit or just learn more about it. Also, if you have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or another disorder of gut-brain interaction, you can try the Digestible app for free. We created this as a tool designed specifically for people with IBS using some of these techniques. So you can search, Digestible on the App Store or the Google Play Store. You can also check out our website, digestibleapp.com. And I might ask you, Rebecca, about next steps for the class sign up.
Mhm. Yeah, so for the class sign up, I would recommend signing up for a Mindful University Project newsletter. And that's where we'll include information about the fall offering. We'll be offering this once every semester. So if it doesn't work for you in the fall, don't worry. We'll have another one in the spring, and it will be held over Zoom for accessibility purposes. So if you do have limitations with getting somewhere in person, we really want to make sure that this is accessible as possible. So more information will include in the description with the newsletter link as well. And also you can follow our Instagram, You Are Mindful University Project. That's where you can get more details. So tell us more about the app. What inspired you to co-found the Digestible app, and how does it support people with IBS and mind-body symptoms?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit of my recovery story and how I was, I found such amazing mind body resources out there. And it was truly life-changing. Um, but I always wished that there was a program designed specifically for digestive issues like IBS, that had things like education about how the brain-gut connection works and tools tailored to those specific symptoms and addressing specific challenges like fear of food, which, when I think in many forms of chronic pain, you might see more commonly like fear of movement or other things. But with digestive issues, it's a very unique fear of food that tends to come up for people. And it's very challenging because you have to eat, right? You have to eat something. And so I always wish there was like this program designed specifically for all these things and had IBS specific recovery stories, which weren't as easy to find as some of the other conditions. So this is exactly what we created with the Digestible app. So it's a mobile app. And we call it a brain gut regulation program that utilizes some of the mind body techniques that we discussed today. And we built this app alongside the help of a wonderful team of experts, psychologists, and dietitians. Dr. David Clark, who is a gastroenterologist and the president of the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms. So he has treated thousands of patients with IBS and other neuroplastic symptoms using a mind body approach. That's what he used in his practice. So it's really amazing to be able to package all of this amazing knowledge and tailored specifically for digestive issues into this program. So you can download it for free and try it. You can listen to the recovery stories for free, see if it might be the right fit for you. And we really hope that you find it helpful.
I think the app is amazing and it's very well made. It's very intuitive and also very user friendly. And so, if you do have IBS or suspect that you do have any digestive issues, highly recommend checking out the Digestible app and letting us know what you think. Also, if you are really interested in diving deeper into pain reprocessing therapy, not only do we have the course, but if you take the course and complete all 4 classes, then you get access to exclusive coaching. So that's a really great benefit to taking the class and also being a part of this Mindful University project so that you can get also one-on-one individualized attention as well. And so, can you talk a little bit more about your coaching, Anna, and what that looks like for individuals?
Yeah, so when I work one-on-one with clients, I like to take a very collaborative and kind of dynamic approach with the clients that I'm working with. I always start out with a little bit of pain neuroscience education, like I mentioned, just learning about what pain is and isn't can be really helpful, and it kind of lays the foundation for the work that we do. And then, I kind of like to branch into more of a PRT or an EAET focus, depending on the client, right? Like different people resonate with different aspects of this journey. And I think that whether it's more of a fear of the symptom and kind of a pain catastrophizing kind of focus and addressing that first, or getting into more of the repressed emotions and the emotional processing work. I think I would like to work with my clients to identify like the areas that they think will be helpful, right? Because at the end of the day, you know yourself best. I can help give you some like frameworks for understanding what the issue might be, and then take it from there and kind of work with them on, and then also, sort of tailoring what practices they resonate with too, right? Like not everyone likes journaling. Not everyone wants to do that. That's fine. There are plenty of other techniques and tools that we can use for addressing some of these mind-body processes. Yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's extremely rewarding. I love seeing my clients getting better, making progress, celebrating the wins with them. And I did want to mention too, we were talking about um, kind of hinting at some of the personality traits
Hmm.
around chronic pain too. I did want to mention that there are certain personality traits that have been identified as more common amongst people with chronic pain. Two big ones are perfectionism and people pleasing. And those are things that I like to bring to light with my clients too, if they do have some of these personality traits. And I also like to point out that oftentimes these personality traits are come from an underlying internalized shameful beliefs about themselves, right? That they're often steeped in shame. And we learn these things often early in life as sort of these defense mechanisms, or ways of navigating life, of trying to gain worth through high achievement or making other people happy all the time, right? Like these are hard things to do, right? These are stressful personality traits because they keep us in this state of constantly working really hard to achieve that sense of worthiness. So another part that I really like to focus on with coaching is self-compassion and building that up as an antidote to shame, because I think we so often, so many of us develop these internalized shameful beliefs that we don't even recognize, right? We just say, "Oh, that's just who I am," or, that's just what I like to do. But we don't realize that it's actually coming from this place of not feeling enough and not feeling like we're inherently lovable and worthy and good. And so, how can we start to work with some of those internalized beliefs? And not we don't want to take away your drive or often the clients I work with are very driven, successful people. But how can we balance that with a little bit of self-compassion and bringing in some of these things to help give the nervous system and brain those periods of rest, and knowing that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to not make everyone happy all the time,
Hmm.
which is not an easy thing to do, right? Challenging those long-held patterns, but it can have really powerful effects with pain and symptoms and your and mental health too, right? Because like I said, these are stressful habits that can kind of keep us in a feeling like we're sort of on a hamster wheel a little bit. So helping people get off the hamster wheel of that is another thing that I really like to work with people on.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up that self-compassion piece because especially having chronic pain and knowing there's a relationship between emotions and pain, it can cause more shame. But most, if not all times, it's not your fault. It's based on childhood experiences, based on society and what you've learned to be correct and what to do. And there's a lot of things that we develop out of a adaptive coping strategy for a specific time, and then we just continue to have that. And so that self-compassion piece is something that we talk about a lot in pain reprocessing therapy because it's so human to have developed these personality traits, to develop chronic symptoms because of what we've lived through. And with knowledge, then we're able to kind of dive deeper with this lens of compassion and see what's actually working towards us or actually what's hurting us and how we can work with that. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And so, is there any other things that you'd like to share with us as we close this podcast episode today? Anything about your work, your experiences, maybe any success stories that you've seen with your clients?
I just wanted to say it was, with the workshop that we did, it's so rewarding to see some of the our participants making these connections between their symptoms and stress and emotions and mental habits, and just getting people to start thinking about the more psychologically rather than just physically, right? Like we're not saying, don't go to the doctor, but um, starting to have a broader lens of what could be causing this. And it just opens up so many more avenues for healing that maybe weren't known about before or considered before. So I'm just so grateful for this collaboration with U of R, and getting to speak on this podcast today to share this information because if it can help one person find this path to healing that maybe they didn't know about, and could maybe help them out of a pretty hopeless place where they're trying treatments that aren't, it's just not the right path for them. I think that's so important. So just wanted to say thank you for giving this platform to share more information about this.
Yeah, and I'm just so incredibly grateful to have you in our network to offer this because we know that chronic pain really impacts academic performance. And so at the end of the day, we want students to thrive. We also want our faculty and staff to flourish and be able to do their best work and really be able to step foot into the workplace and feel well. And so being able to offer these tools is going to be so important. And I'm really excited to continue this work because we're trying to fill a gap in research. It is more of a new field. There's definitely a gap in research that we're trying to fill, and we're conducting data through our baseline and also post-program and 3-month post-program assessments. And so we're able to use these data to really see how this can impact our university population. And so this will really be helpful to understand better about not only what we can improve with the offering, but then also the impacts of such offerings so that it can be more evidence-based. And so that is something that I'm really excited about, given the University of Rochester is an R1 institution and the home of the biopsychosocial approach. We couldn't have done it without you, Anna, and we're just really excited to continue this. And so if any of this resonated with you, if any of this struck your interest, we're also open. If you do want to email us, happy to include our emails as well in the description. So you can reach out to us. You can also include our websites and then also how to sign up for our newsletter so you can stay up to date about when our next offering will be. So thank you so much, Anna, for being on our podcast, and very grateful for you. And if anybody's interested in connecting with us, know that we're just an email away. Bye, everyone.